Hello everyone, my name is Warren. Welcome to a small demo which uses Spring Boot REST API along with OAuth2 security. This is how my demo looks like. There are basically two steps executed in this demo. In the first step, in the Postman, I'm using a post operation and I'm calling the URL OAuth/token. I'm using the basic authorization. I'm giving the password, username as Warren secret and password as secret. And in the body, I'm passing these three credentials: grant type, username, and password. When I click on send, I'll be getting the access token. When I copy this access token and execute the REST URL, which is followed by the access token, and click send. Please note that the operation here is good. When I click send, the page is displayed. This particular message is displayed, which is welcome to OAuth demo, and the status is 200 OK. So how this demo is built, I will show you shortly. Okay, so let me show you my demo. Let me close my existing workspace. Please note that I'm using Eclipse IDE for building this application. Eclipse Oxygen IDE. The database I'm using is MySQL, and as I told you, the Spring framework is SpringBoot 1.5.4. Okay. When I open the workspace, Eclipse workspace, it will ask you to enter a new workspace. I'll say make new folder in the C drive, SpringBoot REST OAuth. Okay, click enter. Please note that this workspace name can be anything. You can as well give a different name for this workspace. Click launch. It will take few seconds for the Eclipse to launch the workspace. So meanwhile, as I was telling you, I'm using the MySQL database to store the user credentials such as username and password. Along with that, I'll be using Hibernate and JPA to get the details from the user details, or to get the authorization details from the database. When the Eclipse launches the workspace, you'll have a welcome page. Close that. Click on New Maven project. If you don't find the Maven project here, click on Other. Go to section called Maven and click on Maven project. Click Next. In the first screen, leave the default as it is. Click Next. In the second screen, type Web App and select this particular option. Click Next and give the group ID. I'm giving the group ID as Let's Start Coding, and the artifact ID as SpringBoot REST API OAuth. Click Finish. You can see on the right hand side corner, the project is being created. If you expand the Maven project, the first thing you'll notice is the Java folder is missing. To enable the Java folder in this project, right click on Properties, click on Java build path, select these last two options, apply and close. Now you can see the Java folder. So this is where I'll write all my Java code. Okay, the next step I do is I configure the dependencies in the pom.xml. To save some time, I've already entered in one of my other applications, so I'll just copy paste from there. Okay, in the pom.xml, the first thing I'll enter is the Spring Boot framework version, which is 1.5.4, and also I'm telling the compiler to use Java 1.8. Next, I'll add the dependency. Okay, I've added various dependencies. I'll run through the important ones. Of course, for the security, you need to have these two dependencies, which is the security and the OAuth2. And for the validations, MySQL and the Hibernate validations, you need this particular dependencies. And the last one I would like to highlight is the JPA dependencies. Since I'm using Hibernate with JPA, you should have this particular dependency. So click save. Okay, you can see that workspace is being configured for these dependencies. All right, so I've added the dependencies in the pom.xml. The next step I do is add the applications.properties file in resources. Right click on resources folder, go to other, go to general, click on file, click next, give the name as application.properties, click finish. Again, to just save some time, I'll copy the entries from one of the other files. What am I entering in the application.properties? I'm giving the URL of my database. Please note that you have to change this database name to the corresponding or to your respective database name. Also, you have to change the user ID password. Then only when you deploy the application on your desktop, it will run. If you don't change the database name, user ID and password, then it may not run. The remaining two you can leave as it is. All right, I've saved my application.properties. The first step I'll do is I'll create the model class. Go to new class. I'll select the package name as com dot let's start coding dot SpringBoot REST API dot OAuth dot model. Here I'll define the class called role. This will basically, the user may have multiple roles, so those role names will be defined in this class. For this class I'll be using the annotation @entity. What annotation entity does, it basically tells that the class is a representation of a table in a database. Whatever name I provide to this class, with the same name a database table will be created. Whatever fields I enter in this class, the database table will have the same columns. Whenever an instance of role is created, a row is inserted into the database. So @entity does all these operations. Please import the necessary dependencies. Right click, quick fix, import javax.persistence.entity. All right, now I'll define the fields, which are private, long, id. The another field is private string name. This id field, I want it to be a primary key in the table, so I'll make use of the annotation @id, and this id value should auto increment. So I'll make use of the value generated value. All right. I'll import the necessary dependency. Also, I'll create a default constructor which I'll be using later. Save it. Now, for these fields, I need to generate the setter and getter. So right click on any of the fields, click on source, generate getter and setters, select all fields, click OK. So with this, my model class is ready. Save it. Next, I'll define a class called user. Again, I'll make use of the annotation @entity. And I'll also make use of the annotation table name equals users. What it does, if I don't give this annotation @table, then in the database a table will be created with the name user. When I am explicitly mentioning @table annotation, then a table will be created with the name users. So that's the purpose of the annotation @table. Please import the dependencies. Right click, quick fix, import the necessary one. Next, I'll define the fields private, long, id, private, string, username, should be username. Next, password. Also, I'll define private, boolean, enable. Okay. Next, I'll define private list. I'll pass this role object. I'll say roles. Okay. An user can have multiple roles. For example, user Varun is there. He can have a multiple roles such as user, admin, and etc. So I'll define a one-to-many relationship using the annotation one-to-many fetch equals fetch type dot eager comma cascade equals cascade type dot all. So let me import the necessary dependencies. Should be list. All right. So I've defined the one-to-many relationship between the user and the roles. All right. Next is I'll define this ID as a primary key. So I'll make use of the annotation @, and this value should auto increment. Then I'll say generated value strategy equals generation type dot auto. Okay. Next, I'll make use of the annotation column name equals user underscore ID. Then I'll say, is this field column nullable? I'll say false. And is this column updatable? I'll say false. So this column, what it does is it will create a column with name user ID, and this will not accept null values, and also this value cannot be updated, or this column cannot be updated. Import the necessary dependencies. Okay. Again, I'll make use of these columns here. Okay. So with this, my all fields are ready in the user table. Let me define the setter and getter methods for these fields. Right click on any of the fields, go to source, click generate and setters, select all, click OK. I'll just copy paste this field. Okay, so with this, now I've defined the fields and the setter and getter methods. I want this class user to implement user details, Spring Boot user details. Spring Boot user details will contain the user information who is currently logged in. So I'll implement this user details. When I do this, it will say I need to add the unimplemented methods. So these are the methods which are added. For this, you have to make small changes. Instead of false, please return true so that the user will not get logged in. User never expires and it will not get logged. Okay. When I make this as true, then user will not get logged or it will not get expired. The next thing I'll define is I'll define list granted authorities equals new array list okay. Then I'll say for role here I'll define string name equals role dot get name dot, I'm just converting the name to uppercase, and to authorities I'll add new simple granted authority. I'll pass the name. So with this, my import the necessary dependencies. Okay, so with this, my model class user is ready, which basically implements the user details, Spring Boot user details, and also we have defined one-to-many relationship with the role. Save it. Next, I'll define the interface user repository. Click on any of the package, new, define interface. Here I'll define the package name as repository, and I'll give the interface name as user repository. Click finish. As I told you before, I am making use of Hibernate with JPA. So I want to extend the JPA repository of Spring Boot. So I'll say extends JPA repository user long. Let me first import the model class. Okay, next I'll import the dependency for JPA repository. Here I'll define a method called user find one by user name string username. Okay, using this method I will search for the username in the database table, and this will return the user from the table. Click save. Okay, so still now I've defined the model class and the user repository. Next, I'll define the service which implements the user detail service. Right click on any of the package class. I'll give the service name as dot service. Here I'm mentioning the class as user service. Click finish. This should implement user details service. Also, I'll make use of the annotation @service for this one. Okay, import the necessary dependency. Whenever I import the service, I should implement the method load by username. So in this method, I'll say private user repository I'll auto wire this. Okay, here I'll return user repository dot find by username semicolon. Import the necessary dependency for the auto wired. So with this, I've defined the service which implements the user detail service, which will app the load by username, and this method is responsible for searching the user from the database. All right. Next, I'll define the class new class. I'll define in the package new class. I'll give the package name as new class I'll give the package name as config. Here I'll give the class name as OAuth2 to config. Click finish. Now one question is, how do the Spring Boot application know that security has to be done using Spring Boot or has to be done using OAuth2? For that, we have to make use of the annotation @enable authorization server. So whenever this annotation is encountered, then Spring Boot application will know that security should be performed using OAuth2. Also, I'll make use of the annotation configuration. Okay. Next, this should extend authorization server configurer adapter. Here are defined private authentication manager sorry, I'll just copy this. Colon, I'll say auto wired. Next, I'll say @qualifier. Here I'll say user details service. Input the necessary dependency. Okay, next, sorry, so auto wired. Next, here I'll define private user details service. Here I'll define @qualifier. I'll say user details service. Okay, next, import the dependency for this. Next, I'll define a variable called private int expiration. Here I'll say @value equals double quotes dollar flower brace. Then I'll say Varun dot auth dot token timeout colon 3600. Import the necessary dependency. Okay, then I'll make use of the bean public password encoder. This is to encode the password encoder. Here I'll return new bcrypt password encoder. Okay, next I'll define the method public void configure. Here I'll make use of authorization server endpoints configurer. Okay, I'll say throws exception. Here using the configurer, I'll say dot authentication manager. I'll pass the okay. Next configurer dot user detail service, to which I'll pass. All right. Next I'll define public void configure. Here I'll make use of client details service configurer. I'll give this as clients and say throws exception. Here I'll say clients dot in memory dot with client. I'll say Varun double quotes. I'll say dot secret. I'll say secret and dot access token validity seconds. I'll give the integer which I have defined, which is expiration. Here again I'll define scopes, to which I'll say read, write and dot authorized grant types as password, comma, refresh underscore token dot resource IDs. I'll say resource and save it. Okay, so with this I've implemented a class called OAuth2 configuration. This is the class which tells the Spring Boot application that security must be done using OAuth2. So in this I basically configured two configured methods, which one will make use of authentication manager and the user detail service, another will make use of in-memory client.in-memory. So save it. Next I'll define the controller. Click on any of the package, right click, new class. In the package called controller, I'll define a package called controller and give the name as demo controller. Click finish. Here I'll make use of the annotation @rest controller, import the necessary dependency, then I'll use get mapping value equals /demo, public string demo. I'll say return welcome to OAuth demo. Import the necessary dependency. The last step is to define the class which will have Spring Boot application annotation. Please note that this should be in the main folder until the Spring REST API OAuth. Here I'll define the class called app. Click finish. Okay, here I'll make use of Spring Boot application, and I'll say enable resource server. Now this application tells, using this application using this class we run this Spring Boot application. So for this we make use of this annotation. Enable resource server is similar to enable authorization server, which we define in this class. It tells the Spring Boot application that security needs to be performed using OAuth2. So here let me first import the dependencies. Okay, next I'll say public static void main string args. Okay, parameter name Spring application dot run. Here I'll say app dot class. Okay, with this my application is ready. Before I deploy this onto the Tomcat server, let's do a Maven build. Right click, run as Maven build. Here please give clean install in the goals. Apply, click run, and you can see the build status in the console. Okay, the build is success. Now I need to configure the Apache Tomcat server. My Apache Tomcat server is present in my C drive. Let me delete the old one. Right click, extract to Apache Tomcat. I'm just extracting the new, I've installed Apache Tomcat, I'm extracting in C drive. This step you can avoid. I just go to the sections called server. Here click Apache and select the Tomcat version as 8.5. Click next. Browse your Apache Tomcat server with C drive. Select the one which has been. Click OK. Click finish. So now I've configured the Apache Tomcat server. You can see on the right hand side the server is being configured. Now I want to run this Spring Boot application. Before I run my Spring Boot application, I've executed this application once before, so the tables are already there in the database. So let me drop the existing tables. So if you see, there is no table with users because I've dropped all the tables. All right, let me run the class file which has the Spring Boot application annotation. So I'll right click on the class file app.java, run as Java application, and you can check the status. in the console. Here you can see the Spring Boot version is 1.5.4. Alright, my Tomcat server is now started and the application is deployed onto the Tomcat server. Now, let me run as I told you, I'll make use of post. Basic authorization is basic authorization. My username Varun, password secret, and in the body select this option and give these three fields: grant underscore type password, username underscore is varun@gmail.com, and password varun123. Okay, before I do this, I need to insert one record into the world.users table. So I'll just insert one record into the table. So this particular user is now in the table varun.users. Whatever I'm entering here is in the table world.users table. So I've inserted that record. This is the query. This is the query you need to insert. We need to insert. Now let me run my application. The URL is OAuth token. I've given the basic authorization. In the body, I've given these three fields. Click send. Here you'll get the authorization. Copy this authorization. Go to a new request where you select the operation as get your localhost colon the port / the demo. This URL I have given in the my controller / demo. Then I should then it should have the access token. So my REST URL followed by the access token which I've generated just now. Click send. Now you got the response and it says welcome to OAuth demo. So this is how you build a Spring Boot REST API with OAuth security using Spring Boot, MySQL, Hibernate with JPA. Hope this demo will help people who wants to build a similar application. Thank you. That's it from my end and thank you very much.